Okay, we're here with John Cowan, and it's so awesome to have you on the podcast. I'm a big fan. Love your singing, love your bass playing, and I could listen to you 24 hours a day. It's one of those voices that I just always love, and it's awesome to have you here. And are you in Nashville now?
Yeah, we live in the Nashville area. We actually live just almost an hour south in a little town called Columbia.
Oh, good.
Just due south.
So it looks like are you in like a recording space of your own, or?
Yeah, this is my music room.
It looks great.
I do not have a recording system.
No, you don't.
I'm digitally challenged, as they say.
Well, that's all right. That's a good place to be sometimes,
I guess.
So I remember seeing you for the first time, and I'm trying to remember when it could have been, and I'm pretty sure it was probably the early 80s with Newgrass Revival in Tampa at the fairgrounds there. And I don't know why I remember exactly where that was, but I was down there on vacation, and my brother and I went to see you perform, and it was life-changing how great that show was. And I always walked away from that going, I swear there's a drummer there, but there was no drummer.
that was Sam Bush. He's the Steve Gadd of the mandolin.
He is, isn't he?
And I think if I remember this correctly, you may have a different remembrance, but I think that was a gig that we played in some kind of crazy outdoor warehouse. And
yeah, it was kind of...
and we opened for Tanya Tucker.
Yes. That
Is
was
that correct?
Yes.
Which I can't believe I remember, but...
You remember it more than I do. I forgot about the Tanya Tucker part.
I just remember it was outside. It was kind of a place that you think to yourself, they're going to put a concert on here? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't a regular music venue.
No, it wasn't. I remember that.
It was a state fairgrounds.
Yes, it was the kind of a flat floor and not... Yeah. That was good.
Anyways, Darren, sorry, I digress.
No problem. So, how are things now with everything? We're all kind of locked down with COVID and not playing as much as we used to. How are you faring with all that stuff going on now?
Well, I gathered a bunch of people up in March, local musicians. Yeah. My friend Andrea Zahn, who plays fiddle and sings like an angel, she's worked with James Taylor for about, I think, close to 20 years. And we've been friends forever. She's younger than I am. They're all younger than I am. And Matt Menifee, who plays banjo, who's phenomenal. He's like Bela, phenomenal. And then this young guitarist named Seth Taylor. He's from North Carolina, and he's the young gun. And another gentleman, another younger guy from North Carolina, also named Ashby Frank, who plays and sings. The singing in this band is stunning. And we called it the Herculeons. And we're still doing shows. We got one coming up on the 23rd. So we've just been doing Facebook Live shows. Yeah. We had a couple actual gigs booked, one here in Nashville and one in North Carolina. And like one was supposed to be the 1st of November, and the other one was supposed to be yesterday. We ended up canceling both of them because of... in our part of the country, COVID is just going crazy.
Yeah.
So that's a long answer to your questions. But I have been, so we've been staying really busy. And actually, this band that we have now, we're going to make a record in January. So
awesome.
It's truly a band record. It's not a John Cowan record with sidemen.
Yeah.
So
yeah, all great players there for sure. I've caught you guys on Facebook a few times, and it's really cool, and you're just kind of sitting around and just playing. It's fabulous to watch.
It's kind of nice, it's like, as long as I've been doing this kind of music, not the Doobie Brothers stuff, but this kind of roots, bluegrass, newgrass music that I do, we've always sat on a porch somewhere and rehearsed. So now we're just doing it on Zoom.
Yeah.
It really feels the same. In fact, there's a picture of Newgrass Revival, the inside cover of one of our records. It's just us sitting on a porch playing. So
yeah, Awesome.
Courtney, Curtis, and I.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So let's take a little deeper dive and kind of let the audience and everyone know kind of how you got started. You kind of grew up in Ohio. Is that where you?
I did, out in a little town called Minerva, which is a suburb of Cleveland.
Yeah. And when did you actually start? Did you start singing first or playing bass first? What came first?
Singing in the church.
Was it? Yeah.
Yep. It was a non-denominational Protestant church. And so I can remember singing it as far back as I can remember. Literally, I can remember singing in church and in choir. And then once the Beatles hit, it was all over.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was 10 when they came out.
Yeah. And so that was, for a lot of people, Beatles were pretty life-changing.
I always say they saved my life, actually.
Really?
And well, yeah, because I was sexually abused at the age of 8. And when you're that age and something like that happens to you repeatedly, I mean, you can imagine, because you're at a pre-sexual age.
Yeah.
So you don't know, you don't have any understanding, and it was very violent, and it went on, and then it stopped. But then, I was just, that really, it's not post-traumatic stress, it's traumatic stress. And, I was just a sweet little eight-year-old guy wearing cowboy shirts. And the next thing I know, my world is completely shattered. And I had no way to even grasp that. And I couldn't talk to anybody about it. But I did love music. I just loved music. My brother played Kingston Trio records when I was 4 or 5. And then I remember the Elvis part of it all, because Elvis in 57, so I would have been 4 years old. So there was a lot of music happening, and through the wounding that was going on with me that I didn't understand, I was gravitating towards music.
Yeah.
And so when I was 10, the reason I said that about the Beatles, it just gave me this, when they came along, there was something about the magic of who they were, their personalities, and then of course their music. And I really just feel like it saved my life. Honestly, I feel that way.
It almost feels like there will never be another Beatles. I mean, it's a time, it's an era, it's everything.
I mean, it'll be I think each generation has their version. I think, like for my kids, it's Radiohead.
Oh yeah.
My kids grew up on the Beatles and Hendrix, and they love that stuff. But their Beatles is Radiohead.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how that is true, how it's a generational thing, and that really, I've read several times, they say you listen to new music until you get to your early 30s, and then from then on, you just carry that set of music with you for the rest of your life. You listen to new stuff, but it really kind of stops around 30.
I think it's some kind of imprinting.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So when did the bass come along? What made you gravitate to bass?
I was living in this. We had moved. We moved from Ohio when I was 3. I mean, we moved to a different spot of Ohio. Sorry about that. And so the bass came into it. I was living in a little neighborhood. Our family was, my sister and I, my mom and dad. My 2 older brothers are already out of the house. God, I completely forgot what I was talking about because I'm going on so much.
That's right. Bass. When did the bass come in?
Oh. When did it come in? That's a good question. So I joined a little neighborhood band in Louisville, Kentucky, where I lived. And it was one of those things where one guy had an amp and a guitar, and he was sitting on his front porch one day, and I was obsessed with music, and I walked down the street, and I was like, what are you doing? Who's that? What is that? I mean, I knew it was a guitar, but it's like I never had met anybody that had one.
Yeah. So
we started hanging out every day, and then we realized that another guy further down in the neighborhood played drums, and he had a set of drums. And so I was nominated to play the bass. And that's how I got into the bass. It's like, okay, we got drums and guitar. We need somebody to play bass.
So did you get a teacher, or did you just pick it up and learn it on your own?
I had started taking guitar lessons. So I had the rudimentary, elementary chords down. And then it was really, literally, it was like, you play bass. Okay. So I drug my dad to the local Roses, which is kind of like a Target store. Somebody told me they still have them in the U.S. But anyways, and he bought me a little, a copy of a Hofner bass called a Univox bass.
Yeah.
It was a Hofner copy. Anyways, and that was it. That's how I started.
That must have been cool to get that, being a Beatles fan and having a Hoffer looking bass. That would have been pretty cool.
I have a picture of it here. Let me show it to you.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny. Hope you'll be able to see this. I don't know. All right. Tell me if you can see this or not. Sorry.
No, it's all right. I'd love to see it. Oh, yeah, yeah. Tilt it back.
That's me.
Tilt the top of it back. Oh, there you go. Yeah. That's awesome.
That is me. I look like I'm 7, but I'm actually 14.
Were you? Yeah. And did you find it easy to just kind of pick up and get going with it, or is it a difficult thing at first?
No, I think I did my 10,000 hours, to be honest.
Yeah.
I can remember. I mean, music at that time, everywhere, Canada, U.S., it's kind of like the BBC has remained over the years, which is, you just heard everything. I mean, and it was AM radio. So, I mean, in those years when I was learning how to play, you know, we had all of Motown in rotation all the time.
Yeah.
Beatles, British Invasion, you know, Buck Owens was on the radio, Charlie Rich, Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin. It was just such a deep, lush time for creativity. And I remember buying Knock on Wood by Eddie Floyd,
Oh, yeah.
which was on Stax. Because if you remember, the label had fingers clicking like this on it. It was a light blue label. Anyways, but I bought that record, and I was down in my basement playing it over and over and over and over again, trying to learn. And I was pretty much a beginner. So I'm sitting there and trying to learn Duck Dunn's bass part, playing it over and over. And I finally, you know, I think I got close. But anyways.
Yeah, and probably back in those days, obviously you don't have a computer and you weren't able to slow down a part or
No.
play it back. And I know, I remember when I was learning to play a couple different instruments, you know, you put the record needle down, and I gravitated to, I played fiddle mainly, but a couple instruments later, I picked up sax, which was kind of a bizarre cluster of where I came from.
How'd you get from one to the other?
I don't know, but I had a couple Boots Randolph records, and so the first song I tried to learn was the Yakety Sax, which was not an easy song to learn when you're just playing the sax. But I'd sit there for hours putting that needle down and trying to pick up the first, you know, couple measures and listen and drop it, and then thinking, wow, this, you know, you just forever. You got really good at dropping the needle right where you wanted it to go, but it was dedication.
The thing about those records, and those were made here in Nashville.
Yeah.
But the guys that were the A crew, the A team back in those days, were actually amazing musicians. You know. Anyways, Floyd Kramer would have been on that, and Bob Moore, I'm sure, was playing the bass on it, and who knows.
When did you gravitate from playing with the kids down the street and in the neighborhood to playing a real gig?
Well, our band kind of got bigger. We got some more, you know, it was one of those things where there were other musicians in our high school.
Yeah.
And so we found another guy in my neighborhood that was really a great drummer. and he was in the marching band. And then another young guy in our same age group, which we were sophomores in high school at that time, who played guitar and sang really well. And so we now had a 5-piece band. It was awesome. And we were really good. Just coincidentally, we had really good singing. Everybody could sing really well.
Awesome.
Our playing probably wasn't as good as our singing yet, but we're working on it.
Did you have any recordings from those days?
No. But we played people's parties at their houses, in their basements. And we did like Battle of the Bands, and there was a couple coffee houses that you could play at in this suburban area where I lived of Louisville. So we actually did play, and it was kind of cute. It's like we bought a Shure Vocal Master PA. Remember the 2 columns? And that was like a big deal. We all worked and chipped in. And then our parents, our moms made us all Nehru shirts to match. They got out their little butterick patterns. And I remember my dad, we had a station wagon. My dad built a little lighting system for us. It was just 2 boxes with 3 colored floodlights in each one.
Yeah.
Red, blue, and yellow or something, red, blue, and green. And he would drive us to our gigs. It was really pretty cool.
My dad did a similar thing. He bought basically kind of 3 Christmas type lights mounted on a piece of plywood, and each of them had a switch, but one gig caught on fire. I still remember
they were so bright, but I just remember the first time that we turned those things on, it just felt like I've made it.
Yeah.
we have our own lights, and to have that bright light in your face, there's something about that feeling that's part of this whole deal that never goes away. I guess it's like grease paint for actors,
Exactly. So what about schooling? Like, did you in high school? What were you thinking that's what you wanted to be, was a musician, or did you have any other ambitions?
Well, it's funny because I had grown up in Cleveland, and then we moved to Pittsburgh. So, and my dad and my brothers were huge football fans, National Football League. So I got really entrenched in that whole culture.
Yeah. And
I played Little League baseball. I played Little League football. But what I realized quickly was that I could sing and play at a pretty high level. But when it came to sports, as much as I love sports, and I had decent eye-to-hand coordination, but I would sit on the bench in the games. So it's like, and when I sang and played, it was like, oh, I'm pretty good at this stuff. And people would say, oh, you really sing good. And so that was a lot better. That made the choice easy. Do I want to sit on the bench during the game and watch everybody else?
Yeah.
Or do I want to be,
a rock star?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's when I decided in my junior year of high school, I quit all the sports stuff and just focused with our little band on having a band.
Yeah.
And I'd sit in class all day long. I'm sure I had ADD, ADHD, whatever, and just draw. I'd take a little ruler with me, and I would draw a stage, and I would draw the amplifiers, and I would draw the microphones.
Awesome.
It was just crazy.
You're making your own stage plots at a young age.
Yeah, exactly.
So, out of high school, where did you find yourself? Did you go post-secondary education, or did you just stick with music?
I went to 1 year of college. It's interesting, my parents had really supported us during high school with the music thing, but when I graduated from high school, they were like, okay, now you need to get serious. You need to find something to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't happy at all about. But I agreed to go to 1 year of college, or I agreed to go to college. And I always tell people that college is where I confused GPA with THC. So what did I do when I got to college? I found a bunch of people like me that were musicians and smoked marijuana, and that was it. That's all I wanted to do was play music. So
Yeah, it makes sense. It's funny now when you're older, you think about your parents giving you that advice. It's still really great advice, being in the music industry for a long time, but you got to follow, your dreams and what you really, really want to do.
Well, that's the thing that I thought was counterintuitive about it. It's like, as you grow up, they say, be the best you can be and follow your dreams. And then when you say, okay, I want to follow my dreams, they're like, well, not so much.
Yeah, not that dream.
Yeah, it's like, well, what is it?
Yeah.
But I've always been proud of myself that I was just stuck to, I knew what I wanted to do when I was 14.
Yeah.
And I was gifted enough at it that I've always been able to make a living at it. But I've always been rather, I don't like to use the word pride. I don't know what the right word would be. I guess maybe pride. I'm proud of myself that I, against all odds, and you know this yourself, this is one of the hardest ways in the world to make a living.
Yeah.
And it's not based on meritocracy.
Yeah.
It's like we all know people that are just geniuses of musicians that never got anywhere.
Yeah. There's a lot of those.
Yeah.
Where did you find yourself once you finished a year of college and decided to do not go back to college? Was it
well, the same guys that I had been in a band in high school, like in my senior year of high school, my dad took a job. We moved a lot when I was a kid because he wasn't in the military, but he was in the transportation business. But anyway, so we moved in my senior year of high school to Evansville, Indiana. And I went to 1 year of school at Indiana State University, Evansville. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that year, I'd been in contact with all my buddies this whole time. I moved back to Louisville by myself. That was my first, move away from home at 18.
Yeah.
Maybe I was 19. Moved back to Louisville, or Louisville, as some people would call it, Kentucky, and started playing in a band and working in a car wash to support myself. And that would have been 72. And I was living in Louisville, working in a car wash, playing in bands. I was doing all sorts of music, playing in a big old horn band with a Al Green's like singer. And then I had my own band. We were so obsessed with Yes that we called the band You. I'm not kidding. So it was our, it was our attempt to be a prog rock band.
Yeah.
And then I got a call 2 years later from Sam Bush to ask if I'd want to come down to Western Kentucky to audition for the band, the Newgrass Revival, and I did.
So how did you have that connection with Sam at that point?
I was part of the rock and roll scene in Louisville, and there was a guy that I'd met from Bowling Green who had this band called Buster Brown, and they were really good, and he was a phenomenal electric guitar player. And we just became friends, and he had grown up with Sam. Sam was still living down in Western Kentucky near Bowling Green.
Yeah.
And this is where Ken Smith, our friend, was from. And the bass player that the Newgrass Revival had at that time decided to quit. He was actually a banjo player.
Oh, yeah.
His name was Butch Robbins, and he quit the band. And so I guess Sam was asking our friend Ken. He actually asked Ken if he wanted to play bass in the band. And Ken was like, Sam, I'm an electric guitar player. Why don't you get a real bass player once and for all? Mm-hmm. And Sam was like, well, okay, you know anybody? And he was like, yeah, I know this kid here in Louisville, and he plays and sings his ass off, and you should call him up. So he gave him my number. So I got a call out of the blue from Sam asking if I would want to come audition for their band.
Yeah. And did he explain the style of music and everything about that, or are you just kind of going and...
I had seen them once.
Yeah.
The young woman I was dating at the time, who later became my wife, had drugged me down to see these guys play in downtown Louisville, and said, you got to come hear this band. They're so cool. They're like, they play bluegrass instruments, but they do Jerry Lee Lewis songs and Leon Russell songs. And I was like, oh, I don't want to see bluegrass.
Yeah.
She's like, no, they're really good. You would really like it. You should come on, let's go. So I went and saw them, and I was duly impressed. They even had a drummer at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, there was these 4 long-haired guys playing banjos and mandolins and fiddles, and just totally, just slamming it.
Yeah.
So I was impressed. I was like, well, this is weird. Because I didn't, strangely enough, growing up in Indiana and Kentucky and Ohio, I didn't really know what bluegrass was.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't really see bluegrass that night either. I saw the Newgrass Revival.
Yeah.
So
what was that audition like?
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Courtney Johnson and his wife Hazel lived in this little house out in the middle of the country, and it was, I don't know, probably 20 miles off the interstate. Anyway, so I went and I met Sam and Courtney at a gas station, and then I followed them to Courtney's house. But what's kind of interesting about it is when I pulled up, Courtney Johnson, who is the banjo player, he was the oldest member of the band. He had this big beard and this long red hair, and he had a cat hat on, caterpillar hat on,
yeah,
and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. And he was driving this like muscle car. It was like a 66 Super Sport Chevelle or something. And it had big tires on it and chrome reverse wheels. It was like, blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh my God. I said, here I go, Thunder Road. And I went over to Courtney's house and I got my bass out and I plugged it in and I was tuning it up and I was playing, as you doodled around when you first turn your instrument on.
Yeah.
And apparently the other 4 of them were in the kitchen, like pinching each other, and they were all giddy because it's like, this guy could really play. And they told me later that they already knew before we sat down to play that I was going to be able to do it.
Oh yeah.
So that's what happened. So we had a drummer at that time. And the first day I was there, they asked if I wanted to be in the band. I said, sure. So we lit up some fatties and spent the whole afternoon playing music.
Yeah.
And I went to bed, and the next morning I got up, and the drummer's car is packed, and he's on the front porch crying. And I'm like, what's going on? And they said, oh, come here, let us talk to you. So we went in another room, and they said, well, we fired him because we don't need him anymore. I felt terrible. But I was like, okay, you're the boss or whatever. Here we go.
Well, yeah, especially with Sam in the band and all that. I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure it was great with the drummer, but I could see their point.
We didn't need him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was your first gig with Newgrass Revival? Do you remember?
Yeah. There was a couple places that we played that we could get to. We played in Bowling Green.
Oh yeah.
And we also played this little club in Louisville. And that was my first gig. We kind of, at that time, the band had reformed, so to speak. So we were starting from scratch with me. It was me and Courtney Johnson and Curtis Birch and Sam. So we were starting over literally.
And were you still doing that same type of style, just kind of doing more alternative bluegrass?
Yeah, they'd already established that part of the band. I mean, yeah. And so we just kept, and Sam was very prolific as a songwriter at that time, really all through up until when Pat and Bela joined the band. He had a guy named Steve Brines that would send Sam lyrics. Fully written songs, choruses, everything intact. We didn't ever change a word. And then Sam would come up with chords and melody, and we'd learn them.
Wow. And when did the change happen with the new players, with the Bela and that whole new sound, or that as we know of Newgrass Revival now?
Well, what happened there was in 1978, through just pure serendipity, we were playing in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Leon Russell was living there. He had just gotten divorced, and we had moved back from Los Angeles to Tulsa. And he ended up, through a strange set of circumstances, coming in with his friend Emily Smith, who he wrote the song Sweet Emily about. Mm-hmm. Like, they were driving down the street, and Emily's like, look, Leon, the Newgrass Boys are playing at blah, 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 blah. And he's like, well, let's go see him. So he came to the sound check. And we did our show, and after the show, he invited us back to his house, and we sat up and played music all night. Just the four of us plus him.
Yeah.
Oh, and he had a percussion player named Ambrose Campbell from Nigeria.
Yeah.
And the next day he was like, you boys want to go on the road with me? We're like, sure. You're Leon Russell. What the hell not? So that started 3 years of our tenure as his band. And we were literally, the way the show went was Newgrass Revival would go out and play for a half hour. People would boo through that whole time.
Yeah.
Literally. And then Leon we'd take a short break, and then Leon would come out and we'd play another 90 minutes with him.
Yeah.
With just Ambrose on percussion, Sam on fiddle and mandolin, me on electric bass, Curtis on dobro and acoustic guitar, and Courtney on banjo. That was the band.
Wow.
And we did that for almost 3 years. And what happened is that Leon kept cutting our stage time. And he also was going through a horrible divorce. So he just wanted to, he bought a big old motorhome. And he just wanted to stay on the road all the time.
Yeah.
I bet we were doing 250 shows a year.
Wow.
Just nonstop, just grind. But we were young.
Yeah.
And we were playing with Leon. We loved it. But two of the guys near the end of our tenure with Leon, like, we started the new band with Bela and Pat in 1981. Mm-hmm. But we worked, Sam and I worked, we hooked up with Leon in 78, 79, 80. So anyways, two of the guys wanted to leave the band being Leon Russell and the Newgrass Revival. And they did. And at that point, Sam and I just decided, well, let's figure out how to make a new Newgrass Revival. But in the meantime, let's just keep working with Leon and try to figure out what we're going to do next. And that's what happened. So the last year that we were with Leon, it was just Sam and I. The other two guys had gone.
Yeah. And
that's when we started searching for people to play. And we already all knew about Bela. Yeah. Bela Fleck. And in fact, Sam had played on his first solo album, or his second solo album. And we had met Pat Flynn, who was from California, at Telluride Bluegrass Festival.
Oh, yeah.
He was playing with Jimmy Ibbotson from the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. Yeah. So, sorry, it's taken so long to tell this story.
No, it's great. It's good.
So that's how we met. That's how we, reformed the band. And so Sam and I finally left Leon's band in 81, or late 80. That's what it was. Yeah. It was like in the fall of 1980. And then we went to my mom's house for literally, I think, a month. My dad had passed away in 74. He had passed away literally. Yeah, anyway, so we went to my mother's house and we rehearsed. We stayed at her house, and Pat and Bela and Sam and I rehearsed there for what I think was a month or 6 weeks.
Wow. And
then we had our first gig in Nashville, and Leon was there and Roy Acuff was there. Wow. It was really strange night. John Harper was there, our friend, and that was the beginning of that part of the band.
Yeah.
That version of the band with Bela Fleck and Pat Flynn.
So where did record success start to happen for Newgrass?
Really not till the last record that we made, which is called Friday Night in America.
Yeah.
Because along the way, the first record we made was for Sugar Hill, and that's called On the Boulevard. And that's the record that still, to me, that and our Live in Toulouse, France record, those are the two records that sound like we sounded live.
Oh, yeah.
Even though one was a studio album. Because once we got on Capitol Records, we felt like, well, we need to use drums, and we need to be thinking about commerciality, and, we have responsibility there. Capitol Records is supporting us financially, etc.
Yeah.
So let's try to get on the radio. And to be honest, that was the undoing of the band.
Oh, yeah.
Once we got signed to a major label, because that band was not built for that.
Yeah.
That band was built for what it was, which is highly artistic, a lot of improvisation in our music.
Yeah.
But I have to say, to Capitol Records' credit, I mean, we still put instrumental. On our last record, there's a 14-minute instrumental on there that Bela wrote called Bigfoot. And Capitol never came to us and said, you can't do that.
Oh, yeah.
They just said, try to find a way to be who you are and get on the radio. So
that must have been different. I mean, obviously, it gave you more success, and people. We built
our audience one person at a time, and I was in the band for 15 years, almost 16, and Sam was in the band for 17 or 18 years. So, I mean, we were road dogs.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about guys traveling in buses with crew guys to deal with their equipment. We're talking about, 6 or 8 people in 2 vans.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Yeah. The good times.
Yeah. So, I mean, we made our audience, out of the realm of radio.
Yeah.
There wasn't any radio for people like us.
No. Yeah. There really still isn't much. You got satellite radio with some bluegrass on it, but besides that, I'm sure there's pockets throughout the States where there's a bit more available for airplay, but nowadays, not as much still.
It's funny, the 15 plus years I was in the band, it's like we watched the music culture, and in terms of commerciality, it just came in waves.
Yeah.
There was disco, and then there was new wave, and then there was Madonna, and then there was the 80s music, and we just kept doing our thing. I personally was just observing it, going, and some of it I liked,
Yeah.
some of it was really good music, but it was like, here's another wave washing over the top of us, and we're not going anywhere, which is probably a good thing. It's like we were being pulled out to sea more than we were headed towards the shore.
Yeah. But yeah, it's that same thing, right? Stay true to what you do and who you are. And that's the best place to be.
Yeah.
So once...
I just feel so fortunate.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, once you found that Newgrass kind of disbanded, and where'd you find yourself at that point?
Oh, man. So I'd grown up being a rock and roll guy, playing rock and roll music. And I loved bands like Free, Paul Rogers' first band, and with Andy Fraser, who was so amazing on the bass. And, I love bands like Yes, and I love the Stones, and I love the Beatles, and I liked Aerosmith, I liked Cream, I liked Led Zeppelin. So I was really a rock guy at heart. So I decided to, this would have been 1990, pursue a rock and roll career,
Yeah.
I was 36 at the time. Anyway, so I got hooked up with this manager that used to be ZZ Top's accountant, and he went on to manage the Dixie Chicks, and he's, a big guy, so to speak. And he got me a deal on Atlantic Records, which was on the Atco label, which is a, boutique part of the label. And so they sent me to Nashville, and hooked me up with all these people to write with, and I had a band. And then it was kind of the wrong, kind of like that oops, wrong planet thing.
Yeah.
Because the next thing I know, grunge hit.
Oh, yeah.
So, at 36, I was a dinosaur.
Yeah, unlike today, that doesn't seem to be as big of a factor. Obviously, there's the young guns, but they're still, they don't look at it at the same.
Yeah, I mean, I loved a lot of it. I love Pearl Jam. I love Nirvana. So many of those bands were just amazing. Chris Cornell, etc.
Yeah. So
I tried doing that.
Yeah.
It didn't work out. And then by another series of accidents, I ended up joining a band with Pat Simmons from the Doobies and Rusty Young from Poco and Bill Lloyd from Foster and Lloyd.
Wow.
And we did 2 records, one for Warner Brothers and one for RCA. And that kind of takes us sort of up to the present, close to the present.
Yeah. Were you, at that time, were you living in Nashville then?
Yes, I've lived here since 1980.
From 80, okay, so you were there.
And I've worked here since 74.
Yeah. Now you were doing, when did you get involved with doing session work? I know you've played on a bunch of people's albums and you sang on a bunch. When did that really click in?
80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Because, it's funny, Newgrass was, Nashville loved our band.
Yeah.
They just did. And we were like the critics loved us, the fans loved us. And so we had a pretty big presence. We had 2 videos that came out when we were on Capitol, and they were, even though they didn't do that great at radio at that time, the video outlet was CMT.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, like Much Music. And we did really, really well on that. So we had really, as a band and as individuals, high visibility. And I was getting calls from all sorts of people to come sing on the record.
Do you enjoy doing that?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
And it's, for me, I've wound up singing on people's records that I bought and used to sit and like a goober look at the covers of, So that's happened to me a lot.
That's pretty cool.
And it continues to do so.
Yeah. And when did the move when you started to perform with the Doobies? Now that was after the band. How did that kind of? I guess your affiliation there just kind of got you the bass part in with the Doobies.
Yeah. What happened was when Pat and Rusty and Bill and I had our little band, which was eventually called the Sky Kings. That band broke up. Yeah. I've lost my train of thought again. I'm so sorry.
No, getting together with the Doobies.
Oh, right. Yeah. So I played with them. Our band with Pat didn't really go anywhere, and the Doobies got reactivated. So they asked me to be bass. If they didn't have a bass player. Willie Weeks had gone on to play with Wynonna Judd, and they got reactivated as a band. And do you want to come play bass and sing background? And I was like, sure. And so here we are.
Awesome. That must have been a fun gig, and still is. I mean, you're back playing with them again.
Yeah, if we ever play again.
I know. Were you supposed to have a lot of dates this year?
Oh yeah, we were doing the 50th anniversary tour with Michael McDonald.
Oh geez.
And he hasn't done a tour with the Doobies since the 80s.
Yeah.
So this was going to be a really big deal, and I think it still will. I don't know when it's going to happen. Everything is resting on COVID as usual.
Yeah. Yeah, I always say that the big thing now is once we get going again, it's not as if everybody can start from the start line all at once. It's just sort of like we got all these tours and all these people who want to get out playing, but can't all start at the same time because there's just not going to be enough people to make that happen. I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit of slow ramp up to where we were.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are saying now that they don't see big tours happening till 2022.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
I don't
sense.
know.
I think some people say the fall of next year, but I think maybe they'll get a few off the ground and see how it goes, and then it will be the following year, and that will be a big year too. I mean, you figure all these people still waiting. There's going to be a lot of people anxious to get out there and do it.
Some people will be in their 80s then. Not me.
No. So, what do you find yourself doing now? What besides doing the Facebook project? Do you have anything coming up that you're start the new album in January?
Yeah, we're going to do that. It's just, this, to be honest, I mean, this is for my wife and I, like, we have never spent this much time together ever.
Yeah.
And that could have gone either way.
Yeah.
And it went really well, and it's still well. It's just, this is the first time in 46 years that I was home in summertime.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Yeah.
So we've just had a lot of moments of bliss and grace, just the three of us being here.
So do you find yourself really liking that? I mean, obviously you miss being on the road and doing that whole thing, but I've known myself, because, obviously summertime's busy for all of us. There's really kind of enjoyed hanging out at home and having that time, but maybe it's going to be finding that balance between the two.
I don't know. I mean, I'm 67. I'll be 68 in August, the end of August. I mean, if I was to be perfectly candid here, and I would probably tell you, I wish I had enough money to retire, because I would right now.
Yeah. Because
I've enjoyed this so much. I love playing music. I love making music. I love singing. Right now, the thought of getting in a bus and being home away from my home and my family is not very attractive, to be honest.
Yeah. I think
you have to watch what you say publicly. Somebody might go, "Oh, fine, you're fired."
I think a lot of people are finding that, right? I hear that from a lot of people. They're finding this thing that they've never had time to do before, and it's been really great.
Well, we've all had to just slow down, and for me, it's caused kind of this Zen existence that I think we all strive for, which is being mindful and peaceful. And it was kind of forced upon us, and in some ways, it's a blessing.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I think hopefully that we'll all come through from this on the other side much better people, and just find something new. I mean, it's.
I mean, especially if our new administration actually gets to take office.
Yeah, you never know. It's been an interesting week or two. We've been watching it quite a bit up here, so it's pretty interesting.
Well, here's the good news for you guys. If can you hear me?
Yep.
The good news for you guys is if Biden actually takes the presidency, you don't have to worry about everybody trying to move to Canada.
I know. Because there are lots of people who are doing that. I know a lot of LA people were obviously getting out of LA, and a bunch of them have moved to Canada or moved back to Canada. It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. This year is, I mean, we're going to remember this for a long, long time. It's not just COVID. It's just been everything that's been crazy. And it's, if you can find, like you said, that Zen place and not have, any mental breakdowns and all that stuff, because a lot of people deal with that as well. And
I think that the younger generations will remember this in the way that we remember Vietnam and
sure.
Kennedy being shot, and both Kennedys being shot, and Martin Luther King being assassinated. I mean, I don't even know how we got through that as a country, to be honest, but somehow we did. And somehow I think we're going to get through this too.
Yeah. Now, musically speaking, we'll wrap up on a couple more questions here.
Okay.
Would you find, after this many years playing and touring all over the place, is there anybody out there that you haven't had a chance to work with that's on your list and say, oh, I always wish I could have played with this person or sang with this person or recorded with this person? Is there anybody out there that kind of on the top of your list?
Well, it's such a fantasy. I mean, it depends on if you're talking to people that I could actually get to.
Yeah.
That's different than, Stevie Wonder.
Well,
so, oh man, I don't know. And I'm not trying to blow off the question. I just, honestly,
it's a tough one.
I've had so many experiences like that in my life that I just never, ever, ever dreamed were possible. Yeah. There's no way. I was in a movie with Dolly Parton about 15 years ago, and I had a speaking part.
Yeah.
And this is a perfect example of that. So she's about 5'2". I'm only 5'9". And I'm not exaggerating. She was this close to my face. She was 4 inches from my face. And I'm looking down, and I've got this scene of dialogue with Dolly Parton, and I'm sitting there going, I'm in a fucking movie with Dolly Parton. I'm looking at Dolly Parton's face. Her face is 6 inches from my nose. This is crazy. Yeah. So I've had so many of those kind of instances in my life. I mean, being with the Doobies, I bought their records and played their records when I was in college.
Yeah.
A million of those things, working with Roseanne Cash and Steve Earle and Delbert McClinton and Rodney Crowell and people that I just hold in such high regard. And, I get to collaborate with people like that. It's like, well, unbelievable. Garth Brooks, whatever. There's been so many of those instances in my life.
Yeah. And it's cool with your voice. I can pick it out anywhere. A very distinct sound, I think, but it fits in so many genres, right? It just kind of always finds a spot in there. You're such a vast array of music you can fit yourself into. That's pretty awesome, because you usually find that you can't always make that crossover, especially if you're in the country world or a bluegrass world. It's sort of being able to sing something else.
Well, there's really a learned art to that. It's not just about me, John Cowan, the singer. We're going to have him sing harmony to said artist. There is, and that's something you have to learn how to do, which is, you have to learn how to phrase with people, how to listen to people, how to enunciate like them. Singing harmony is an art form. Yep. It really is. And it's something that you have to learn how to do through repetition. It's not, in other words, you just don't go in there and go, here I am, I'm John Cowan, I'm going to do here's my way. And because that's not harmony. Harmony involves, like the word harmony, it requires harmony.
Yeah.
So.
One last question, and it's kind of touring related.
Okay.
Another one of those kind of, if you had a chance, do you have any, I like to ask them this question, do you have any venues, places you haven't performed at that you said, I always wish I could have performed at this venue? I'm sure you've... Oh,
maybe Madison Square Garden or Carnegie Hall.
Yeah.
Really, I've been in so many amazing venues in my life. Same thing, pinch yourself moments. Like, really? Yeah. I'm here?
If you had to choose playing at some place like the Station Inn or playing a big amphitheater with the Doobies, I know they're two different things, but if you really had to make a choice, which one is suited for you?
Well, we're talking about two different things here, because when I'm playing with the Doobies, it's their music.
Yeah.
And I'm just a steward trying to hold up all the amazing things that Tyran Porter created in their music. And when I'm playing at the Station Inn, I'm playing my music. So it's so different. I don't choose one over the other. I just try to do the best job I can with each one. I'm not trying to blow that question up, but that's the reality.
Yeah.
I don't like one better than the other, but they're completely different. And for me, that's a source of joy. We went on a tour with Carlos Santana a couple of years ago, 2 summers ago now. He was an amazing guy. It's like, And somebody in his band said to me, one of the crew guys, I think, he said, one of the first things I learned here was when we get to the venue, Carlos doesn't say, how long do I have to play? He says, how long do I get to play?
Oh, yeah.
And he would, every night, he'd come and sit on the side of the stage for our sound checks. He'd come out every night. They had a chair for him. And I've toured for 40 some years with other artists. This is singularly, I've never seen this happen before. Yeah. He's so involved and he likes music so much that he just wanted to, I don't know what his motivation was for that behavior, but I find it to be highly spiritual and highly attractive.
Yeah.
And it made me feel worthwhile in a way.
Yeah.
That he wanted to do that. And anyways, there's not a lot of people like him.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
No, that's true. What about, we should mention our good mutual friend, Mr. Craig Bignell, who's actually was on one of my very early podcasts. How did that story come about, you getting Craig to perform with you?
That is through my dear friend, John Gully, J.K. Gully.
Yeah.
Singer, songwriter, guitarist extraordinaire.
Certainly is, yeah.
That is how I met Craig, actually. And I don't remember the course of events, but I remember when I met Craig, I was so astounded because A, he could sing like an angel. B, he could play drums like a mofo.
Yeah.
And C, he plays the banjo. And he plays really well.
He does, yeah.
Which makes perfect sense to me because banjo is a percussion instrument.
Yeah.
If nothing else. So I was always astounded by him. What happened, though, unfortunately, is after 9/11, and we did a lot of research and spent a lot of money trying to get him visas. And sometimes he'd get to the border and the U.S. people would just say, nah, not today.
Yeah.
He'd be like, what? Here's my visa. And they go, so what? Go home. So we'd be in the States somewhere getting ready to play a big gig for a decent amount of money. And I'd get a phone call that says, Craig can't be here. So that ultimately we just had to part ways because of that.
Yeah.
And it was because of U.S. customs. It wasn't the Canadian people.
Yeah. Craig has this special gift of, he's an awesome drummer, stick wise and everything, but you put a pair of plastics in his hands. And there's nobody I know that can play like he does with the set of plastic. He just has that touch with those sticks that it's wonderful. And he always is a guy who I always find who just doesn't come and lay it down. You play around him. He likes to play around what everyone else is playing, which is pretty neat.
Truly gifted person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been
it's still called Pearl.
Say that again.
Is their band still called Pearl?
No. He used to be Pear that he was playing with.
I'm sorry. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And he has a band
with his wife,
with
right?
His wife now.
Yeah.
And it's the best thing I think that's ever happened to him. Because now he's kind of a front guy. He is a front guy, and I seen him play. I was out west and had a day off, and he was in town doing a show. And you know how funny Craig is, and he just that his humor is just unreal. And him as a front guy telling stories and being funny and being that dry sense of humor type of guy, it's wonderful. I mean, it's just because he's kind of shy, but yet has these great lines and he plays crazy and his wife plays bass, stand-up bass, and sings. She sings like an angel too. So it's a great combination, and you'll have to see it one day. You'll love it.
I hope I do.
Yeah. Anyways, it's been awesome having a chance to chat with you, and I know even through Craig how excited he was. I remember when he got the gigging was going down, and driving down to Nashville all the time, and wherever you were playing, and he had nothing but just awesome things to say about you all the time. And I know Vassar would be playing with some of the gigs, and it was a wonderful time. But as I mentioned, a big fan. I love everything you've done, and I'm always excited to see anything new, and I'm excited to see the new album you can start working on at the beginning of the year. That's going to be pretty cool. That's some awesome players.
We're excited.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you again for spending this time, and hope one of these days we'll get to meet up sometime.
Thank you so much for your time, Darren, and your interest. I appreciate it. It's been great.
Awesome. And I'm sorry about the little Wi-Fi hiccups.
Oh, it's all right. It's all good.
Yeah, we make it work.
All
Thanks
right,
again,
man.
John. Have a great one.
You too. God bless.
Thanks.